The rain poured down like bullets from heaven, each drop hitting the cracked pavement with the fury of 1,000 broken dreams. In the shadow of the towering glass building that bore his name, Marcus Wellington stood frozen, watching a scene that would haunt him for weeks to come. A woman sat huddled against the cold brick wall, her dark skin glistening with rainwater, her clothes torn and dirty from months of living on the streets. She held a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps, God bless," in shaky handwriting. But what stopped Marcus cold was not her desperate situation. It was the way she looked up at him when their eyes met, with a dignity so fierce, so unbroken, that it cut through his chest like a blade. She did not beg. She did not grovel. She simply existed in that moment with a strength that made his billion-dollar empire feel like paper in the wind. That look would change everything. Because 3 floors above them, in a lawyer's office that smelled of old leather and broken promises, sat a will that would force Marcus to make the most impossible choice of his life. A choice between his fortune and his freedom. A choice that would lead him to marry this homeless woman within 30 days, or lose everything his family had built for 3 generations. The cruel irony was not lost on him. His grandfather, the man who had built the Wellington fortune from nothing, had written a clause so bizarre, so seemingly impossible, that Marcus had laughed when he first heard it. The heir must marry a woman who has known true hardship, who has lived without the comfort of wealth, and who can teach him the value of what truly matters in life. The lawyers had explained it as an old man's final lesson to a grandson he feared had grown too soft, too removed from the struggles of real people. Now, standing in the rain, watching this woman who radiated strength despite her circumstances, Marcus felt the weight of that lesson crashing down on him. He had 30 days to find a wife who met his grandfather's impossible requirements, or the Wellington fortune would be donated to charity, leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back. The woman's name was Diana, though he did not know it yet. She had been living on the streets for 8 months, ever since the factory where she worked closed down and she could no longer afford her small apartment. Before that, she had been a supervisor, known for her fairness and her ability to solve problems that others could not. She had a mind like a steel trap and a heart that refused to break, even when life kept throwing punches. Diana had not always been homeless. 2 years ago, she had a steady job, a small but clean apartment, and dreams of maybe opening her own business someday. She had been saving money, taking night classes in business management, and building a life piece by careful piece. Then her mother got sick with cancer, and Diana spent every penny she had on treatments that the insurance would not cover. When her mother died anyway, Diana was left with nothing but grief and a mountain of medical debt. The factory closing was just the final blow. Without a job and with debt collectors calling every day, Diana lost her apartment and found herself on the streets. But even then she refused to give up. She kept looking for work, kept trying to rebuild, kept believing that tomorrow might be better than today. Marcus had been born into wealth so vast that he had never questioned where his next meal would come from. He had attended the best schools, traveled the world, and taken over his family's business empire without ever truly understanding what it meant to struggle. His biggest worry had been which charity gala to attend or which investment to make next. He was not a bad man, but he was a man who had never been tested by real hardship. The Wellington family had made their fortune in shipping and real estate, building an empire that touched every major city in the country. Marcus was the 3rd generation to run the company, and under his leadership, it had grown even larger. But his grandfather had worried that success had made the family soft, that they had forgotten the values that built their wealth in the first place. When the old man wrote his will, he included clauses that seemed designed to teach lessons rather than simply pass on money. The strangest of these was the marriage requirement. The heir had to marry someone who had experienced real poverty, real struggle, within 1 year of the old man's death. The marriage had to last at least 2 years and it had to be real, no fake ceremonies or paid actresses. If the heir failed to meet these requirements, the entire fortune would be given away. Marcus had thought his grandfather was being dramatic. He had planned to contest the will, to find some legal way around the requirements. But his lawyers had been clear, the will was ironclad, written by the best legal minds money could buy. There was no way around it. Either he married someone who met the requirements or he lost everything. For weeks, Marcus had tried to find a solution that did not involve actually following through with his grandfather's plan. He had private investigators looking for women who might fit the requirements but who would be willing to enter into what amounted to a business arrangement. He had lawyers exploring every possible loophole. He had even considered walking away from the fortune entirely and starting over on his own. But standing in the rain looking at Diana, Marcus felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was the way she held her head high despite her circumstances. Maybe it was the intelligence he could see in her eyes, or the strength that radiated from her even in her lowest moment. Whatever it was, he found himself walking toward her before he could think better of it. "Excuse me," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. Diana looked up at him with those same fierce eyes, taking in his expensive suit and polished shoes. She had learned to read people quickly on the streets. It was a matter of survival. This man was clearly wealthy, but there was something different about him. He looked lost. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the cold. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. "How do you ask a stranger to marry you? How do you explain that their poverty makes them valuable to you in a way that feels wrong even to think about? How do you offer someone a deal that could change both of your lives forever?" The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, a clock tower chimed the hour. Marcus had 29 days left to make his choice. As he stood there, looking down at this woman who seemed to carry the weight of the world with grace, he realized that his grandfather's final lesson had already begun. Diana watched the man in the expensive suit struggle with whatever he wanted to say. She had seen his type before, wealthy people who sometimes wandered into areas like this, usually lost or slumming for some reason they could not explain to themselves. Most of them would drop a few dollars and hurry away, eager to return to their comfortable lives where poverty was something that happened to other people. But this man was different. He looked at her like he was seeing a person, not just a problem to be solved with money. It made her curious despite herself. "Are you lost?" she asked, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. Marcus let out a short laugh that had no humor in it. "You could say that." He looked around at the empty street, the broken streetlights, the graffiti-covered walls. "Actually, I was wondering if I could talk to you. Maybe buy you dinner?" Diana studied his face carefully. She had learned to spot danger, to read the intentions behind people's words. This man seemed genuine, but she had been wrong before. "Why?" "Because you look like someone with a story and I'm someone who needs to hear it." It was an odd answer, but something in his voice made her believe he was telling the truth. Diana had not had a real meal in 2 days, surviving on scraps from restaurants and the occasional sandwich from well-meaning strangers. Her pride warred with her hunger, and for once, hunger won. "There's a diner about 3 blocks from here," she said. "They don't mind people like me as long as you're paying." Marcus nodded. "Lead the way." The diner was exactly what Marcus expected: worn vinyl booths, fluorescent lights that flickered, and the smell of grease that had soaked into every surface over decades. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, brightened when she saw Diana. "Honey, where have you been? I was worried about you." "Still around, Mrs. Chin?" "Still fighting." Mrs. Chin looked at Marcus with obvious suspicion. "This man bothering you?" "No," Diana said quickly. "He's buying me dinner." They found a booth in the back, away from the handful of other customers. Marcus watched as Diana studied the menu like she was memorizing it, and he realized she was trying to find the cheapest items. Without thinking, he reached across the table and gently took the menu from her hands. "Order whatever you want. Whatever you're really hungry for." Diana met his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus had been asking himself the same question since he walked over to her on the street. The honest answer was that he needed something from her, but looking at her now, really looking at her, he realized there was more to it than that. "When was the last time you had a real meal?" he asked instead of answering. "Sunday. Mrs. Chin saved me some soup. Today is Thursday." Diana shrugged like it was no big deal, but Marcus saw the way her hands trembled slightly as she set the menu down. "I've gone longer." When Mrs. Chin came back, Diana ordered carefully soup, a sandwich, and coffee. Marcus asked for the same, though he was not particularly hungry. As they waited for their food, he tried to figure out how to begin the conversation he needed to have. "What's your name?" he asked. "Diana." "You." "Marcus." He paused. "Diana, can I ask you something personal?" She tensed slightly. "Depends what it is." "How long have you been on the streets?" Diana was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the scratched table surface. 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. The precision of her answer told Marcus that she was counting every single day, that each one mattered to her in a way he could barely comprehend. "What happened?" "Life happened." Diana looked out the window at the rain, which was still falling steadily. "My mom got cancer. I spent everything I had trying to save her. When she died, I had nothing left. Then the factory where I worked closed down, and I couldn't find another job fast enough to keep my apartment. I'm sorry about your mother. She was a good woman. Worked 2 jobs her whole life to make sure I had what I needed. She would hate seeing me like this." Marcus heard the pain in her voice but also something else, a determination that impressed him. What did you do at the factory? I was a floor supervisor. Managed a team of 30 people, made sure orders went out on time, solved problems when they came up. Diana smiled slightly. I was good at it too. People said I could read situations better than anyone. Do you miss it? Every day. I miss having a purpose, having people count on me. I miss feeling useful. Diana looked at him directly. Now I'm going to ask you something personal. What do you do for work that lets you wear $1,000 suits and buy dinner for homeless strangers? Marcus almost choked on his water. How do you know how much my suit costs? I used to manage inventory for high-end clothing stores before the factory job. I know quality when I see it. Diana leaned back in the booth. So what's your story, Marcus? The food arrived before he had to answer, and Marcus watched as Diana ate with careful control. She was clearly hungry, but she did not rush, did not act desperate. Even in her circumstances, she maintained her dignity. I run a company, he said finally. Several companies, actually. My family has been in business for a long time. What kind of business? Shipping, real estate, some manufacturing. We employ about 50,000 people across the country. Diana nodded thoughtfully. That's a lot of responsibility. A lot of families depending on you. Marcus had never thought of it that way. To him, the employees were numbers on reports, budget items to be managed. But Diana was right, they were families, people with their own stories and struggles. Diana, he said, deciding to take the first step toward honesty, I need to tell you why I really approached you tonight. She set down her spoon and looked at him with those sharp eyes. I figured there was more to it. My grandfather died 6 months ago. He left me everything, the entire family fortune. But there's a catch. There always is with rich people. Marcus smiled despite himself. He put conditions in his will. Strange conditions. One of them is that I have to marry someone who has experienced real hardship, real poverty. Someone who can teach me about what matters in life. Diana was very still for a long moment. And you think I'm that someone? I think you might be exactly what he had in mind. How long do you have? 29 days. Diana pushed her bowl away, though it was only half empty. Let me make sure I understand this. You want to marry me so you can inherit your family's money. It's more complicated than that. Is it? Diana's voice was calm, but Marcus could see the anger building in her eyes. Sounds pretty simple to me. You need a poor wife and I'm poor. Problem solved. Diana, please listen. No, you listen. Diana leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. I may be homeless, but I'm not desperate enough to be bought. I have my dignity and I have my pride, and I won't sell either one of them for your inheritance. She started to get up, but Marcus reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Please. Just hear me out. No, but I've met a lot of people in my life and most of them wanted something from me. You didn't? Even when I offered you everything, you were willing to walk away. That tells me something about your character. Diana was quiet for a moment. Marcus, if I agreed to this, what would our life actually look like? I mean day to day. I don't know, he admitted. I've never been married before. I guess we'd figure it out together. Where would we live? I have a house in the city and a place upstate. You could choose or we could get somewhere new if you preferred. And I'd be free to do whatever I wanted with my time? Completely free. You could go back to school, start a business, travel, whatever makes you happy. Diana took a deep breath. I want to meet you somewhere public today. I want to talk more about this before I give you an answer. Of course. Where? The park on 5th Street. There's a bench by the pond. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Marcus arrived early and found Diana already waiting for him. She looked different in the daylight, younger than he had first thought, maybe 35, with intelligent brown eyes and graying hair that she kept pulled back neatly despite her circumstances. She was wearing the same clothes as before, but she had clearly made an effort to clean up as much as possible. You're early, she observed as he sat down beside her. So are you. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching ducks swim across the small pond. Finally Diana spoke. I've been thinking about what you said. About your grandfather wanting you to learn something. And? I think he was trying to teach you empathy. The ability to understand what life is like for people who don't have the advantages you've had. Marcus nodded slowly. That makes sense. He used to tell me stories about growing up poor, but I never really listened. I thought they were just old man stories. They weren't stories. They were lessons. Diana turned to look at him. Do you really want to learn those lessons or do you just want to inherit your money? It was a fair question and Marcus took his time answering. A month ago I would have said I just wanted the money. But meeting you has made me realize how much I don't know about real life. What do you mean? I've never had to worry about where my next meal was coming from. I've never had to choose between paying rent and buying medicine. I've never had to ask strangers for help. Marcus looked at her directly. You have, and you've survived it with more dignity than I probably would have managed. Diana felt something shift inside her chest. That's the first time anyone has called my situation dignified. It is though. The way you handle yourself, the way you treat people even when you have nothing, that takes real strength. They sat quietly for another few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Diana made her decision. If I agree to this, I have conditions. Marcus felt his heart speed up. Name them. First, this marriage has to be real. Not in the romantic sense but in the legal sense. I won't be part of any fraud or deception. Agreed. Second, I want to be involved in your business. Not running it but understanding it. If I'm going to be your wife, I want to know how you make your money and how it affects other people. Marcus was surprised by this request, but he nodded. That's fair. Third, when this is over, when the 2 years are up, I want a clean break. No ongoing obligations, no strings attached. Just a fair settlement and the freedom to start over. Of course. Diana took a deep breath. And fourth, I want you to promise me that you'll take this seriously. That you'll really try to learn whatever it is your grandfather wanted to teach you. Because if you don't, we're both wasting our time. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, seeing the determination in her eyes, the intelligence behind her conditions. His grandfather had been right. This woman could teach him things he needed to learn. I promise, he said quietly. Diana stood up and extended her hand to him. Then I guess we're getting married. As Marcus shook her hand, he felt like he was stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. But for the first time in months, he also felt like he was moving toward something meaningful instead of just going through the motions of his privileged life. What happens now? Diana asked. Now we plan a wedding. And we start figuring out how to be married to each other. Diana laughed, and Marcus realized it was the first time he had heard her really laugh. The sound was warm and genuine, and it made him think that maybe this crazy plan might actually work. This is either going to be the best decision I've ever made or the worst, she said. Either way, Marcus replied, it's going to be interesting. As they walked away from the pond together, both of them were thinking about the future for the first time in months. For Diana it meant hope. For Marcus, it meant the possibility of becoming the man his grandfather had wanted him to be. Neither of them could have predicted how much they were both about to change. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity that left both Marcus and Diana feeling like they were living someone else's life. Marcus had insisted on taking care of the immediate necessities first, getting Diana proper clothes, a place to stay, and access to healthcare she had been putting off for months. Diana had been reluctant to accept so much help so quickly, but Marcus had been surprisingly understanding about her pride. Instead of just throwing money at every problem, he had asked her what she needed and listened to her answers. When she said she wanted to earn her keep somehow, he had suggested she help him understand parts of his business that he had always taken for granted. I want you to visit some of our factories, he told her one morning over breakfast in his downtown apartment. Talk to the workers, see how things really operate. You understand manufacturing in a way I never will. Diana looked up from her coffee, surprised. You're serious? Completely. My grandfather built this company by understanding every level of the operation. I've been running it from boardrooms and spreadsheets. Maybe it's time I learned how it actually works. This was how Diana found herself touring a textile factory in New Jersey, wearing a hard hat and safety glasses, talking to workers about their jobs and their concerns. It was the first time in months that she had felt useful, and the workers responded to her in a way that surprised even her. You used to do this kind of work? Asked Maria, a seamstress who had been with the company for 15 years. Something like it. I was a floor supervisor at a different factory. It shows. You asked the right questions. Diana spent 3 days at that factory taking notes and talking to everyone from the newest hire to the plant manager. What she found concerned her. The workers were skilled and dedicated, but there were problems that management either did not know about or had chosen to ignore. Equipment that needed maintenance, safety protocols that were not being followed, and a general feeling that the home office did not care about anything except the bottom line. When she reported back to Marcus, he listened carefully to everything she had to say. How bad is it? He asked. Not terrible but not good either. The people running that plant know their jobs, but they're not getting the support they need from corporate. And the workers feel like they're just numbers on a spreadsheet. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What would you do to fix it? Start by visiting more often. The plant manager told me no one from the home office had been there in over a year. How can you run a business you never see? My father used to visit the plants regularly. I guess I got away from that when I took over. Diana could see that he was genuinely troubled by what she had told him. Marcus, why don't you come with me to the next one? See it through your own eyes instead of just hearing my report. Would you mind? It's your company. You should understand how it works. The next week, they traveled together to a shipping facility in Baltimore. Diana watched as Marcus interacted with the workers, and she could see him struggling to connect with people whose lives were so different from his own. But he was trying, and the workers seemed to appreciate that. Mr. Wellington, said Tom, a forklift operator who had been with the company for 20 years, I've been working here since your grandfather hired me personally. He used to come by every few months just to see how things were going. Always remembered my name, asked about my family. What happened to those visits? Marcus asked. Tom shrugged diplomatically. Times change, I guess. That night, in their hotel room, they had gotten separate rooms, but had fallen into the habit of talking over dinner about what they had seen each day. Marcus was unusually quiet. What are you thinking about? Diana asked. My grandfather. Tom's right, he did know everyone's name. He used to take me on those visits when I was a kid, but I was always bored. I thought it was a waste of time. And now I think maybe that was the most important part of his job. Diana smiled. You're learning. Am I? Because I feel like I'm discovering how much I don't know about my own company. It's not a great feeling. It's a starting point. You can't fix problems you don't know about. Over the following days, as they continued their tour of Wellington facilities, Diana watched Marcus begin to change. He started asking different questions, paying attention to details he had never noticed before. He began to see the company not as a collection of profit centers, but as a network of people whose livelihoods depended on the decisions he made. Meanwhile, Diana was changing too. Having a purpose again, feeling like her opinions and experience mattered, was bringing back a confidence she had lost during her months on the streets. She found herself looking forward to each new facility, each new challenge to understand and improve. You're good at this, Marcus told her one evening as they reviewed notes from their visit to a warehouse in Ohio. I like solving problems. I always have. Is that what you want to do? After we're married, I mean. You could have your own department, help improve operations across all our facilities. Diana looked at him in surprise. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a career. You understand this business better than most of the executives I have working for me. It was tempting, more tempting than Diana wanted to admit. But she was also wary of mixing business with their unusual personal arrangement. Let's see how the marriage part works out first, she said carefully. Fair enough. As their wedding date approached, they had to deal with the practical questions of how to present their relationship to the world. Marcus's lawyers had been discreet but thorough in making sure all the legal requirements were met. The media, always interested in Marcus's personal life, had begun asking questions about his mysterious new fiancée. We should probably get our story straight, Diana said one morning over breakfast. People are going to want to know how we met. Marcus had been dreading this conversation. What do you want to tell them? The truth mostly. We met downtown, you were impressed by my business background, we fell for each other quickly. It's not a complete lie. You think people will believe it? Diana looked at him seriously. Marcus, do you want them to believe it? It was a loaded question and they both knew it. Over the past weeks, spending time together, working together, getting to know each other, something had begun to shift in their relationship. They were not in love, it was too soon for that, and their circumstances were too complicated, but there was a genuine friendship developing and maybe something more. I want them to believe that I'm lucky to have found you, Marcus said finally. Because that part is completely true. Diana felt heat rise in her cheeks. Marcus, I'm not saying I'm in love with you. I'm saying that meeting you has been the best thing that's happened to me in years. You've helped me see my own life clearly for the first time. And you've given me hope for the future. That's not nothing. They looked at each other across the breakfast table, both aware that they were standing at some kind of crossroads. The marriage had started as a business arrangement, but it was becoming something more complicated and more real. What happens if we actually start to care about each other? Diana asked quietly. I don't know. I guess we figure it out as we go. That's not very reassuring. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Diana, I can't promise you that this will be easy, or that we won't hurt each other, or that it will last beyond the 2 years we agreed on. But I can promise you that I'll be honest with you, and that I'll respect whatever decisions you make about our future." Diana looked down at their joined hands. His were soft from a lifetime of privilege, while hers were still rough from months of hardship. But somehow they fit together. "Okay," she said. "We'll figure it out as we go." The wedding was small and private, held in Marcus's apartment with just a judge and 2 witnesses. Diana wore a simple blue dress that Marcus had helped her choose, and Marcus wore a suit that was elegant but not ostentatious. When the judge asked if they took each other as husband and wife, they both said yes with conviction, even though neither of them was entirely sure what they were committing to. After the ceremony, they sat on Marcus's balcony overlooking the city, sharing a bottle of champagne and trying to process what they had just done. "So," Diana said, "I guess we're married now." "I guess we are. Any regrets?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "No. You. Ask me in 2 years." They both laughed, and in that moment the future seemed full of possibility rather than uncertainty. Neither of them knew that the real test of their marriage was still to come, or that the lessons Marcus's grandfather had wanted to teach would prove more challenging and more rewarding than either of them could imagine. But for now, watching the sun set over the city they were both learning to see with new eyes, it felt like they had made the right choice. 3 months into their marriage, Diana and Marcus had settled into a routine that surprised them both with how natural it felt. They shared breakfast each morning, discussing their plans for the day. Marcus had begun spending more time visiting company facilities, often taking Diana with him as his unofficial advisor. Diana had started taking business classes at night, working toward a degree she had abandoned years earlier when life got in the way. Their relationship remained friendly but careful. They slept in separate bedrooms and maintained a respectful distance, but there were moments, a shared laugh over dinner, a meaningful look during a business meeting, the way Marcus's hand would linger when he helped her with her coat, that suggested something deeper was developing. It was during a visit to a Wellington shipping facility in Portland that Diana first noticed something was wrong. She was talking to Janet, a dock supervisor who had been with the company for 12 years, when the woman mentioned something that made Diana's blood run cold. "It's been hard since the layoffs were announced," Janet said casually. "We're all wondering who's going to be next." Diana felt her stomach drop. "Layoffs? When were they announced?" Janet looked confused. "Last week. Didn't Mr. Wellington tell you? Corporate says they need to cut costs, so they're letting go of about 30% of the workforce over the next 6 months. Diana managed to keep her expression neutral until she could get away from Janet, but inside she was furious. Marcus had said nothing to her about layoffs. Nothing about cost-cutting measures that would put thousands of people out of work. She found him in the plant manager's office, discussing shipping schedules like nothing was wrong. "Marcus," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "could I speak with you privately?" He looked up, saw something in her expression, and excused himself from the meeting. They walked outside to the parking lot, where Diana finally let her anger show. "Layoffs, Marcus? Really?" His face went pale. "Diana, I can explain dash." "Explain what?" "That you're putting thousands of people out of work and you didn't think your wife should know about it." "It's not that simple. The board made the decision. We're facing increased competition and our profit margins are dash." "Stop." Diana held up a hand. "Just stop. Do you hear yourself right now? You're talking about profit margins while people like Janet are terrified they're going to lose their jobs." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I know how it sounds, but sometimes these decisions have to be made. It's business." "It's not just business, Marcus. These are people's lives. These are families who depend on those paychecks." Diana's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "Janet has worked for your company for 12 years. She has a mortgage and 2 kids in college. What's she supposed to do if you lay her off? Diana, please understand. If we don't cut costs, the whole company could be at risk. Then everyone loses their jobs." "Is that really true, or is that just what your board told you?" Marcus opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. The truth was he had not questioned the board's recommendation very closely. The financial projections showed that layoffs would improve their quarterly numbers, and that had seemed like reason enough. "You don't know, do you?" Diana said, reading his expression. "You don't actually know if these layoffs are necessary or if they're just the easiest way to boost profits. The board has experience with these situations dash. The board doesn't work on the factory floor. They don't load trucks or operate machinery or supervise production lines. They see numbers on spreadsheets, not people." Diana turned away from him, looking out at the busy shipping yard where workers were loading containers onto trucks. "Your grandfather would be ashamed of you." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? You told me he built this company by caring about his workers, by understanding every level of the operation. Now you're ready to throw away thousands of jobs without even questioning whether it's really necessary. Marcus felt anger flare up in response to her accusations. You've been part of this family for 3 months, Diana. Don't lecture me about what my grandfather would have wanted. Maybe someone needs to lecture you, since you seem to have forgotten. They stood in angry silence for a moment, both breathing hard. This was their first real fight as a married couple, and it felt like everything they had built together was suddenly at risk. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked finally. I want you to look at the actual numbers. Not just the projections your board showed you, but the real financial situation. I want you to consider alternatives to layoffs. And I want you to remember that every person who loses their job is someone like Janet, someone with a family and responsibilities and bills to pay. And if the numbers show that layoffs really are necessary? Diana looked at him directly. Then we find a way to make them as fair and humane as possible. Generous severance packages, job placement assistance, extended health insurance. We treat people like people, not like line items on a budget. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. I should have looked at this more carefully before agreeing to it. Yes, you should have. And I should have discussed it with you. We're supposed to be partners in this, Marcus. At least until the 2 years are up. They drove back to the hotel in uncomfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Diana was disappointed but not entirely surprised by Marcus's willingness to go along with layoffs. It reminded her that despite the progress he had made, he was still a wealthy man who had never faced real hardship. Marcus, meanwhile, was struggling with feelings he had not expected. Diana's anger had hurt him more than he wanted to admit, and not just because she was criticizing his business decisions. Somewhere along the way, her opinion had started to matter to him in a way that went beyond their marriage arrangement. That night, in his hotel room, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his board of directors for the following week. He also spent several hours going through financial reports, trying to understand the company's situation for himself instead of relying on summaries from others. What he found troubled him. The company was profitable, but the board was focused on maximizing short-term gains rather than long-term stability. The layoffs would indeed boost their quarterly numbers, but they would also eliminate experienced workers who would be expensive to replace when business picked up. Again, Diana, in her own room, was questioning whether she had made a mistake in agreeing to this marriage. The man she had been getting to know over the past few months had seemed genuinely interested in learning and growing. But today she had seen the other side of him, the privileged businessman who could make decisions that affected thousands of lives without thinking twice. The next morning at breakfast they were polite but distant with each other. Marcus could see that Diana was disappointed in him, and the knowledge sat heavy in his chest. I've called a board meeting for Monday, he said quietly. Diana looked up from her coffee. And? I'm going to recommend that we delay the layoffs while we explore other options. What kind of other options? Temporary salary cuts for executives, including myself. Reducing non-essential spending. Maybe looking at early retirement packages for people who are close to retirement age anyway. Marcus met her eyes. I spent half the night going through our financial reports. You were right, we're not in as bad shape as the board made it sound. Diana felt some of her anger fade. What changed your mind? You did. And thinking about what my grandfather would say if he could see what I was about to do. Marcus paused. Diana, I'm sorry. You were right to call me out on this. I'm not trying to make your job harder, Marcus. I just think there has to be a better way than putting people out of work. There probably is. I just never bothered to look for it before. They finished breakfast in a more comfortable silence, both aware that they had weathered their first major disagreement and come out stronger for it. But Diana could not shake the feeling that there were more tests to come, and she wondered if Marcus was really as committed to changing as he claimed to be. The board meeting the following Monday was tense. Marcus presented his alternative cost-cutting proposals and was met with resistance from several directors who had been counting on the layoffs to improve their quarterly results. Marcus, said Richard Blackwood, the longest-serving board member, these are nice ideas, but they're not going to have the same impact as reducing payroll costs. Our shareholders expect to see significant improvement in our margins. Our shareholders also benefit from having a stable, experienced workforce, Marcus replied. If we lay off 30% of our workers now, we'll just have to hire and train new people when business picks up. That's expensive and inefficient. If business picks up, said another board member, we can't make decisions based on optimistic projections. We also can't make decisions based on fear, Marcus countered. I've looked at our actual financial situation, and while we need to cut costs, we don't need to destroy people's lives to do it. The debate continued for over 2 hours. In the end, Marcus was able to convince the board to try his approach for 6 months. If the alternative cost-cutting measures did not produce the desired results, they would revisit the layoff option. When Marcus called Diana to tell her the outcome, he could hear the relief in her voice. "You did the right thing," she said. "I hope so. If this doesn't work, it's going to reflect badly on both of us." Marcus, success isn't just about quarterly profits. It's about building something sustainable, something you can be proud of. Is that what your grandfather would have said? My grandfather never had a business empire, but he always said that how you treat people when you have power over them says everything about who you really are. That evening, when Marcus came home to their apartment, he found Diana cooking dinner, something she had started doing occasionally as a way to contribute to their household. It was a simple meal, but it smelled wonderful, and Marcus realized he was looking forward to sitting down with her and talking about their day. "Smells good," he said, loosening his tie. "Chicken and rice. Nothing fancy, but it's what I grew up eating." "My mother never cooked," Marcus said, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. "We always had a chef or we ate out. Do you miss that? The fancy meals?" Marcus considered the question as he watched Diana move efficiently around the kitchen. "No, I don't think I do. This feels more real." Diana smiled, and Marcus felt something warm settle in his chest. Over the past few months, moments like this had become more frequent, small instances of domestic contentment that neither of them had expected to find in their unusual marriage. As they sat down to eat, Marcus found himself thinking about how much his life had changed since meeting Diana. 6 months ago, he had been going through the motions of running his company without really understanding it. Now he was fighting his own board to protect his workers, and it felt like the most important thing he had ever done. "Diana," he said suddenly, "thank you. For dinner? For everything. For helping me see things differently. For not letting me take the easy way out." Diana looked at him across the small table, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "You're welcome. But Marcus, you did the hard work yourself. I just asked the right questions. Maybe that's what I needed. Someone to ask the right questions." They finished dinner in comfortable conversation, talking about their plans for the next day and sharing stories from their very different childhoods. Neither of them mentioned the fact that they were starting to feel like a real married couple, or that the line between their business arrangement and something deeper was beginning to blur. But both of them were aware of it, and both of them were starting to wonder what it might mean for their future together. The success of Marcus's alternative cost-cutting measures became clear within 2 months. Instead of the massive layoffs his board had recommended, the company had implemented executive pay cuts, reduced unnecessary spending, and offered early retirement packages to workers who were ready to leave. The result was a leaner operation that maintained its experienced workforce while actually improving morale. Diana had been right about something else too. The workers responded well to feeling like their jobs were secure. Productivity increased, and several facilities reported the highest efficiency ratings they had seen in years. Marcus found himself being congratulated by business leaders who had initially questioned his decision. "You've turned into quite the humanitarian," said Catherine Pierce, his former fiancée, at a charity gala they attended together. "Very different from the Marcus I used to know." Marcus looked across the room to where Diana was talking with several other wives, looking elegant in a navy blue dress they had chosen together. People change. Do they? Or do they just discover who they really were all along? It was a thoughtful question, and Marcus found himself thinking about it long after the gala ended. As he and Diana rode home in the back of his car, he asked her what she thought. About what Catherine said. About people changing versus discovering who they really are. Diana was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights passing by. "I think both can be true. Sometimes we change because we have to. Sometimes we change because we want to. And sometimes we just finally become brave enough to be who we always were inside." "Which one do you think applies to me?" "Maybe all three." Diana turned to look at him. "The Marcus I met 6 months ago was going through the motions of being someone he thought he was supposed to be. The Marcus I know now seems more like he's figuring out who he actually wants to be." "And what about you? Are you changing or discovering?" Diana smiled. "I'm remembering. When I was on the streets, I had to focus so much on just surviving that I forgot about the person I used to be. Being married to you, having security again, it's letting me remember what I'm capable of." Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his chest when she said, "being married to you," like it was something real and important. Over the past few months, the line between their arrangement and a real marriage had become increasingly blurred. They had started sharing more of their daily lives, eating meals together, watching movies in the evenings, talking about their hopes and fears in ways that went far beyond their original agreement. Marcus had even started telling people that Diana was his wife without the mental quotation marks he had used at first. The shift had been so gradual that neither of them had really acknowledged it until the night of the gala, when they came home to find a letter waiting for them that would change everything. "It's from my lawyer," Marcus said, opening the envelope with his name written in formal script. "Good news or bad news?" Marcus read the letter twice before answering. "I'm not sure. He says there's been a development with my grandfather's will. He wants to meet with both of us tomorrow morning." Diana felt a chill of worry. "Development? What kind of development?" "He doesn't say. Just that it's important and that we both need to be there." That night, neither of them slept well. Diana found herself wondering if somehow their arrangement had been discovered, if there was some legal challenge to their marriage that could invalidate Marcus's inheritance. Marcus worried that his grandfather had included some additional requirement that they had not been told about. The next morning, they sat in the law office of Hamilton and Associates, the firm that had handled the Wellington family's legal affairs for 3 generations. Mr. Hamilton, a dignified man in his 70s, looked at them both with an expression that was hard to read. "Thank you both for coming," he said, settling behind his large desk. "I have some rather unusual news concerning your grandfather's will, Marcus." "Is there a problem with our marriage?" Diana asked directly. "On the contrary. Your marriage has exceeded every expectation your grandfather had." Mr. Hamilton opened a thick folder. "What I'm about to tell you was meant to remain confidential until certain conditions were met. Those conditions have now been satisfied." Marcus and Diana exchanged glances. "What conditions?" Marcus asked. "Your grandfather was concerned that you might enter into a marriage of convenience to satisfy the requirements of his will. He was very specific that the marriage had to be real, had to be based on genuine care and respect between you and your wife." Diana felt her heart start to race. How would he know if it was real? Mr. Hamilton smiled slightly. "He arranged for you both to be observed over the past 6 months. Not intrusively, but enough to determine whether your marriage was genuine." "We were spied on?" Marcus's voice was tight with anger. "Not spied on. Observed. Your grandfather wanted to make sure that his final lesson was truly learned, not simply endured." "And what did these observers report?" Diana asked, though she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. "They reported that you have built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. That you have both grown as individuals while learning to work together as a team. That your marriage, while it may have begun as a practical arrangement, has become something much more meaningful." Marcus felt a mix of embarrassment and relief. "So we passed his test?" "You exceeded it. Which brings me to the real reason for this meeting." Mr. Hamilton pulled out another document. "Your grandfather included a codicil to his will that was only to be revealed if your marriage proved to be genuine. He wanted to give you both a wedding gift." Diana leaned forward. "What kind of gift?" "A foundation. He set aside $50 million to be managed jointly by you and your wife, for the purpose of helping working-class families in crisis. Families like the one Diana came from, facing circumstances like the ones that led to her homelessness." The room was silent for a long moment as they both absorbed this information. "He wanted us to run a foundation together?" Marcus asked. "He wanted you to use your combined strengths, Marcus's business experience and Diana's understanding of real hardship, to help people who are facing the kinds of challenges that shaped you both." Diana felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "He thought of everything, didn't he? Your grandfather was a remarkable man. He believed that true wealth came from using your advantages to help others, and he wanted to make sure that lesson was passed on to the next generation." Marcus was quiet for a long time, thinking about his grandfather's final lesson. The old man had not just wanted him to marry someone who had faced hardship, he had wanted him to learn to see the world through her eyes, and then use that knowledge to make a difference. "There's one more thing," Mr. Hamilton said. "The codicil also states that if your marriage ends in divorce before the 2-year mark, the foundation money reverts to other charities. But if your marriage continues beyond 2 years, the foundation becomes yours permanently, regardless of what happens to your personal relationship." Diana and Marcus looked at each other, both thinking about the same thing. Their 2-year agreement was coming up in just 6 months. "So he's giving us an incentive to stay married," Diana said quietly. "Or a test to see if we care more about the work than the money," Marcus replied. After they left the lawyer's office, They walked through the city in silence, both processing what they had learned. Finally Diana spoke. I feel like he's still teaching us lessons from beyond the grave. Are you upset about being observed? Diana considered this. I should be, but I'm not. If anything, I'm glad that someone was watching to make sure this was real. Is it real, Diana? Our marriage, I mean. She stopped walking and turned to face him. They were standing in the same park where they had made their agreement almost a year ago, but everything felt different now. I don't know what to call it, Marcus. It's not a fairy tale romance, but it's not just business anymore either. We're partners. We care about each other. We've built something together. Something worth continuing? I think so. But not for the foundation money. For us. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had not even realized he was carrying. So what do we do now? Now we figure out how to run a foundation together. And we stop pretending that this marriage is temporary. As they walked home together, both of them were thinking about the future in a new way. They had started as strangers brought together by necessity, but they had become something neither of them had expected. A team, a partnership, maybe even the beginning of a real family. Marcus's grandfather had gotten his wish. His grandson had learned to see the world through the eyes of someone who had faced real hardship, and in doing so, he had discovered who he really wanted to be. Diana had found her way back to the confident, capable woman she had been before life knocked her down, and she had found it with a partner who valued her strength and intelligence. Neither of them was the same person they had been a year ago, and both of them were better for the change. The old man's final lesson had worked exactly as he had planned, bringing together two people who needed each other more than they had realized. The Wellington Foundation for Working Families opened its doors 6 months later in a renovated building downtown, not far from where Marcus and Diana had first met. Diana had insisted on the location, wanting to be in a neighborhood where the people they were meant to help would feel comfortable coming to them. The foundation's mission was simple but ambitious: to provide emergency assistance to working families facing crisis, and to create programs that would help prevent those crises from happening in the first place. Diana had drawn from her own experience to design services that addressed the real needs she had seen on the streets: emergency housing assistance, job training programs, healthcare advocacy, and small business loans for people trying to start over. Marcus had used his business connections to build partnerships with local employers, creating a network of companies committed to hiring people who had faced hardship. He had also negotiated with banks and landlords to create second-chance programs for people rebuilding their credit and their lives. The idea is to catch people before they fall, Diana explained to a reporter who was writing about the foundation's opening. Most people who end up homeless aren't lazy or addicted or mentally ill. They're just people who got hit by bad luck and didn't have enough resources to recover. And if they do fall, the reporter asked, then we help them get back up. But we do it in a way that preserves their dignity and builds on their strengths. Marcus watched from across the room as Diana spoke with confidence and passion about their work. Over the past year, he had seen her transform from a woman barely surviving on the streets to someone who could command a room full of social workers, business leaders, and politicians. But more than that, he had watched her find her purpose again. Their marriage had evolved too. The 2-year mark had come and gone without any discussion of divorce. They had moved into a larger apartment together, sharing not just space but a life that felt natural and right. They were still careful with each other in some ways, still aware that their relationship had begun as an arrangement, but the affection between them was real and growing stronger. You did good today, Marcus told Diana as they drove home from the foundation's opening event. We did good. This is as much your work as mine. I wrote the checks. You designed the programs. Diana smiled. That's what partnerships are about. We each contribute what we're good at. Marcus reached over and took her hand, something that had become natural between them over the past few months. Diana, can I ask you something? Always. Are you happy? Really happy, not just satisfied or content, but happy. Diana considered the question seriously. A year ago, she had been sleeping in doorways and wondering if she would survive another winter on the streets. Now she was running a foundation, married to a man she had grown to care about deeply, and working to help people facing the same struggles she had overcome. Yes, she said finally. I'm happy. Are you? I'm more than happy. I'm grateful. For everything that led us to this point, even the hard parts. Even your grandfather's crazy will? Especially that. He knew what he was doing, didn't he? Diana laughed. He was either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. That night, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city, Diana found herself thinking about how much her life had changed. Not just the practical things, the security, the comfortable home, the meaningful work, but the deeper changes. She felt like herself again for the first time since her mother had died, like the person she was meant to be. "Marcus," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." He looked up from the book he was reading. "What is it?" "I'm in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and honest and terrifying. They had been dancing around their feelings for months, both aware that something deeper was developing but neither willing to be the first to name it. Marcus set down his book and turned to face her fully. "Diana, I know this wasn't part of our agreement. I know we said this was a partnership, not a romance. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship or gratitude. Do you want to know what I was reading?" Marcus held up his book, a collection of poetry he had never bothered to open before meeting her. "What?" "A poem about finding love in unexpected places. I've been reading it over and over, thinking about us." He reached for her hands. "I'm in love with you too, Diana. I have been for months." "Really? Really? You're the best thing that ever happened to me, and not because of your grandfather or the foundation or any of that. Just because of who you are." Diana felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but they were happy tears. "So what do we do now?" "Now we stop pretending this is temporary. We make this real in every way." Marcus stood up and extended his hand to her. "Diana, will you marry me? Really marry me, not for inheritance or convenience, but because we love each other and want to build a life together?" Diana laughed through her tears. "We're already married." "I know. But I want to do it again the right way this time. I want to marry you because I choose you, not because I need you." "Yes," she said, standing up and moving into his arms. "Yes, I'll marry you again." They held each other on the balcony, looking out at the city where they had both been lost and found each other. Neither of them could have imagined, that night almost 2 years ago when they first met, that they would end up here, truly in love, building something meaningful together, having found in each other exactly what they had been looking for without knowing it. Their second wedding was everything their first had not been, a celebration with friends and family, a declaration of love rather than a business arrangement, a beginning rather than an ending. Diana wore a white dress that made her look radiant, and Marcus wore a smile that his friends said they had never seen before. "Do you think your grandfather would be proud of us?" Diana asked as they danced at their reception. "I think he'd be smug about how well his plan worked," Marcus replied. "But yes, I think he'd be proud. I wish I could have met him. You would have liked each other. You're both stubborn and brilliant and completely impossible to argue with." Diana laughed. "Is that your way of saying you love me?" "That's my way of saying I can't imagine my life without you." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by people who cared about them, Diana thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had lost everything, her mother, her job, her home, her hope, only to find something better than she had ever dreamed possible. Marcus was thinking about his grandfather's final lesson, and how it had taken him longer than it should have to understand what the old man was trying to teach him. Wealth was not just about money. It was about what you did with your advantages, how you used your resources to make the world better. And the greatest wealth of all was finding someone to share that mission with, someone who made you want to be the best version of yourself. Their first dance ended, but neither of them wanted to let go. They stood holding each other in the middle of the dance floor, both thinking about the future they were going to build together, the foundation they would grow, the lives they would touch, the love they would nurture. It had not been a fairy tale romance, but it had been something better, a real love story between two people who had saved each other in ways they were still discovering. And as they looked into each other's eyes, both of them knew that this was just the beginning of their adventure together. 2 years after their second wedding, Diana stood in the foundation's main office, reviewing the quarterly reports that showed just how much their work had accomplished. In 4 years of operation, the Wellington Foundation had helped over 3,000 families avoid homelessness, provided job training to 1,500 people, and helped launch 200 small businesses. But the numbers, impressive as they were, only told part of the story. Diana thought about Maria, the single mother who had come to them facing eviction and was now managing her own daycare center. She thought about James, the veteran who had been sleeping in his car and was now working as a construction foreman while finishing his college degree. She thought about the dozens of families who had written to thank them for help that had changed their lives. Deep in thought, Marcus asked, coming up behind her and placing his hands on her shoulders. "Just thinking about how far we've come. Regrets?" Diana leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "None. You. Only that it took me so long to understand what my grandfather was trying to teach me." Marcus had indeed learned his grandfather's lessons, but he had gone beyond them too. The foundation was just one part of his work now. He had restructured the entire Wellington company to prioritize worker welfare and community investment alongside profits. The result had been a more stable, more profitable business that other companies were studying as a model. "Speaking of your grandfather," Diana said, turning in his arms, "I have some news that I think would make him very happy." "What kind of news?" Diana smiled and placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "The kind that's going to change our lives again." Marcus's eyes widened as he understood what she was telling him. "Are you pregnant?" 8 weeks. Marcus picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. They had been trying for a baby for the past year, hoping to grow the family they had built together. "Are you happy?" Diana asked when he set her down. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed," Marcus said. "So yes, I'm happy." They had talked about having children, about what kind of parents they wanted to be and what kind of world they wanted to create for their kids. Diana wanted to raise children who understood both privilege and responsibility, who knew that their advantages came with obligations to help others. Marcus wanted to be the kind of father his grandfather had been to him, present, engaged, and committed to teaching important lessons about what really mattered in life. "Have you thought about names?" Marcus asked as they sat down on the couch in Diana's office. "A few ideas. But I keep coming back to one name for a girl." "What's that?" "Oh, because that's what you gave me when I had none." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. "And for a boy?" "I was thinking about your grandfather's name." "What was it?" "William. But everyone called him Bill." "William Marcus Wellington," Diana said, trying out the sound of it. "That has a nice ring to it. What if we have twins? Or triplets?" Diana laughed. "Let's worry about one baby at a time." The news of Diana's pregnancy brought both families together in a way that surprised everyone. Marcus's parents, who had been politely skeptical of his marriage to a formerly homeless woman, had gradually come to respect and even admire Diana. Her work with the foundation, her obvious intelligence, and the way she had changed their son for the better had won them over. Diana's extended family, aunts and cousins who had lost touch with her during her time on the streets, had reconnected when they learned about her marriage and her work. The pregnancy brought them all together for a celebration that felt like a reunion. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Diana's Aunt Sarah told her at the baby shower her friends had organized. "She always said you were going to do something special with your life." "I hope so. I want this baby to know about her grandmother, about the woman who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities." "She will. And she'll know about her father too, the man who saw your worth when you couldn't see it yourself." Diana looked across the room to where Marcus was talking with some of their friends from the foundation, his face animated as he discussed their plans for expanding their programs. He had grown so much from the man she had first met, but she could still see traces of that lost person who had approached her in the rain 4 years ago. "He saved me," Diana said quietly. "Honey, from what I can see, you saved each other." As the baby shower continued around them, Diana reflected on the truth of her aunt's words. She and Marcus had saved each other, not just from their individual struggles but from lives that had been missing something essential. They had found in each other not just love, but purpose and meaning and a shared vision of what they wanted to accomplish together. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Diana continued working at the foundation until a few weeks before her due date. She had trained a capable staff to handle the day-to-day operations, but she remained involved in the strategic planning and major decisions. "I'm not going to be one of those women who disappears when she has a baby," she told Marcus one evening as they assembled the crib in what had been his home office. "I know. The foundation is your life's work. Our life's work. And I want our children to grow up understanding that their parents chose to use their privileges to help other people. They will. And they'll be proud of what we've built together. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met? If your grandfather hadn't written that will?" Marcus paused in his assembly of the crib to consider the question. "I think I would have stayed exactly as I was, going through the motions of a life without any real purpose. And you would have found your way back eventually because you're too strong not to, but it would have taken longer and been much harder. So we were both lucky. We were both exactly where we needed to be at exactly the right time." Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning, healthy and perfect and absolutely beautiful. They named her Hope, as Diana had suggested, and from the moment Marcus held her in his arms, he understood a new kind of love, fierce and protective and infinite. "She's perfect," he whispered to Diana as they both looked down at their sleeping baby. "She's ours." Hope's arrival changed their lives in ways both small and profound. Diana discovered that she could love someone even more than she loved Marcus, which she had not thought possible. Marcus found that holding his daughter made him think differently about everything, about the world they were creating for her, about the legacy they would leave behind, about the values they wanted to pass on. The foundation continued to grow under their joint leadership, but now it felt even more important. They were not just helping other families, they were building the kind of world they wanted their daughter to inherit. "I want her to understand that having advantages means having responsibilities," Diana said one evening as she nursed Hope while reviewing foundation reports. "She will. She'll grow up seeing us work to help other people, and it will seem natural to her. Do you think she'll ask about how we met? About why I was homeless?" Marcus looked at his wife and daughter, illuminated by the soft light of the table lamp, and felt his heart swell with gratitude for the strange path that had brought them all together. "I think she'll ask and we'll tell her the truth. That sometimes bad things happen to good people, but that doesn't define who they are. That her mother is the strongest, smartest, most compassionate person I've ever known, and that I'm grateful every day that I was smart enough to recognize that when I met her." Diana smiled at him over their baby's head. "And what will you tell her about yourself? About the man you were before we met?" "I'll tell her that her grandfather left me a gift that changed my life, not money but wisdom. The wisdom to understand that the most important things in life can't be bought, they can only be earned through love and work and commitment to something bigger than yourself." Hope stirred in Diana's arms, making the small sounds that babies make when they're dreaming. Both parents watched her with the fascination that new parents have for every tiny movement their child makes. "I love our life," Diana said quietly. "Even though it started so strangely? Especially because it started so strangely. If your grandfather hadn't written that will, if I hadn't been on the streets that night, if you hadn't been brave enough to approach me, none of this would exist." Marcus reached over and touched his daughter's tiny hand, marveling at how small and perfect her fingers were. "My grandfather always said that the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. He was right about everything, wasn't he? Everything." As Hope grew from an infant into a toddler, she became the center of their world in the best possible way. She was curious and bright and fearless, with Diana's intelligence and Marcus's determination. More importantly, she was growing up in a household where love was demonstrated not just through words but through actions, through the work her parents did to help other people, through the way they treated each other and everyone around them. The foundation had become one of the most respected organizations of its kind, and Diana and Marcus were frequently asked to speak at conferences and serve on boards for other charitable organizations. But they were careful to maintain their focus on their core mission and to keep the foundation true to its original purpose. "Success is when you can help more people," Diana told a reporter who asked about their growing influence. "Not when you get more recognition for helping them." Marcus had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Wellington Industries to focus more on the foundation, though he remained chairman of the board. The company continued to thrive under the management team he had built, and he took pride in the fact that it had become known as one of the best employers in the country. "You've built something your grandfather would be proud of," Diana told him one evening as they watched Hope play with her toys in their living room. "We've built something he would be proud of," Marcus corrected. "This is all of our work, yours, mine, and his." 5 years after Hope's birth, the Wellington Foundation had grown beyond anything Diana and Marcus had originally imagined. They now operated in 12 cities, had helped over 10,000 families, and had become a model for other organizations trying to address poverty and homelessness in comprehensive ways. But success had brought new challenges. There were offers to expand nationally, requests for partnerships with major corporations, and constant pressure to grow bigger and faster. Diana and Marcus found themselves at a crossroads, trying to decide how to handle the foundation's success without losing sight of their original mission. "I'm worried we're getting too big," Diana said during one of their weekly planning meetings. "When I visit our offices in other cities, they feel different. More corporate, less personal. What do you want to do about it?" "I want to slow down. I want to make sure we're still serving the people we set out to help, not just building an empire." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Over the past few years, he had learned to trust Diana's instincts completely. When she sensed that something was wrong, she was usually right. What would that look like practically? It would mean saying no to some of the expansion opportunities. It would mean keeping our offices small and local instead of building big regional centers. It would mean staying focused on direct service instead of getting caught up in politics and publicity. The board isn't going to like that. They're excited about the growth opportunities. Diana smiled. "Since when do we let other people tell us how to run our foundation?" "Point taken." The decision to prioritize depth over breadth was not popular with everyone involved in the foundation, but it proved to be the right choice. By keeping their operations small and local, they were able to maintain the personal touch that had made them effective in the first place. They continued to help families one at a time, building relationships and trust rather than just providing services. Hope, now 5 years old, had started asking questions about her parents' work and why it was important to them. Diana and Marcus had been carefully introducing her to the Foundation's mission, bringing her to family-friendly events and letting her see the difference they were making in people's lives. "Why did that lady cry when she hugged you, Mama?" Hope asked after a Foundation event where they had celebrated the opening of a new transitional housing program. "Because we helped her find a place to live when she didn't have anywhere to go. She was happy." "Why didn't she have anywhere to go?" Diana looked at Marcus, and they shared one of those silent conversations that married couples have when they're trying to decide how much to tell their child about difficult topics. "Sometimes people lose their homes because of things that aren't their fault," Diana said carefully. "Maybe they get sick and can't work, or their job goes away, or something happens that costs a lot of money they don't have." "Like when you didn't have a home?" Diana felt her heart catch. They had told Hope simplified versions of their story, but she was getting old enough to understand more details. "Yes, like when I didn't have a home. But Daddy found you and helped you. Daddy and I helped each other. And now we try to help other people the way we helped each other." Hope seemed satisfied with this explanation, but Diana knew that as their daughter got older, she would want to know more about her parents' unusual beginning. They had agreed to always be honest with her, to help her understand that their love story was unconventional but real. That night, after Hope was asleep, Diana and Marcus talked about their daughter's questions and what they meant for their family's future. "She's going to figure out eventually that our story is different from other people's," Diana said. "Is that going to be a problem for her?" "I don't think so. I think it's going to make her stronger and more compassionate. She's growing up understanding that people can overcome difficult circumstances, that love can grow in unexpected ways, and that having advantages means having responsibilities. She's lucky to have you as a mother. She's lucky to have both of us. And we're lucky to have her." Marcus pulled Diana closer to him on the couch where they were sitting, both of them tired after a long day but content in the way that comes from meaningful work and deep love. "Diana, can I tell you something?" "Always. Sometimes I think about that night we first met, and I wonder what would have happened if I had just walked past you. If I had been too cowardly or too selfish to stop and talk to you. But you weren't. You stopped. But what if I hadn't? What if I had found some other way to meet my grandfather's requirements? Some easier way that didn't involve getting to know you as a person?" Diana considered this. "Then you would have gotten your inheritance, but you wouldn't have gotten your life. And I would have found my way back eventually, but it would have taken longer and been harder. And Hope wouldn't exist. Do you think we were meant to find each other? I think we were two people who needed each other at exactly the right time. Whether that's fate or luck or just the way life works sometimes, I don't know. But I'm grateful for it." Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I love our life. Even the complicated parts? Especially the complicated parts. They make the good parts even better." As they sat together in their comfortable living room, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, photos of Hope, awards from the Foundation, books they were reading, toys scattered on the floor, both of them felt the deep satisfaction that comes from having found not just love, but purpose. Their marriage had begun as a solution to a problem, but it had become something neither of them had expected. A true partnership in every sense of the word. They had saved each other, built something meaningful together, and created a family that was grounded in both love and service to others. Marcus's grandfather's final lesson had worked perfectly. By forcing his grandson to marry someone who had faced real hardship, he had ensured that the Wellington fortune would be used not just to maintain wealth, but to create positive change in the world. More importantly, he had given Marcus the greatest gift possible, the chance to find real love and real purpose. The Foundation continued to grow and evolve, always staying true to its core mission of helping working families in crisis. Diana and Marcus continued to learn from each other and from the people they served, never losing sight of the lessons that had brought them together. And Hope continued to grow into a child who understood, even at her young age, that love was something you demonstrated through actions, that privilege came with responsibility, and that the most important things in life were the connections you made with other people. Their love story was not a fairy tale, but it was something better. A real partnership between two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed to become the best versions of themselves. And as they looked toward the future, All three of them knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them. 10 years had passed since Marcus first approached Diana on that rainy street corner, and their life together had become everything neither of them had dared to hope for. The Wellington Foundation was now helping families in 20 cities. Hope was a bright and compassionate 10-year-old who volunteered at the foundation's family events, and Diana and Marcus had welcomed a second child, a son they named William after Marcus's grandfather. But it was on a quiet Tuesday morning as Diana reviewed applications for their newest program helping formerly incarcerated people find housing and employment, that she discovered something that would test everything they had built together. The application that caught her attention was from a man named Robert Chen, Mrs. Chen's son from the diner where she and Marcus had their first real conversation. Diana remembered Mrs. Chen mentioning her son, who had been in prison for drug-related charges, and her hope that he would get his life together when he was released. What Diana did not expect to find was that Robert's application contained information that changed everything she thought she knew about her own story. According to his file, Robert had been present the night Diana's mother died at the hospital. He had been working there as a janitor while trying to get clean, and he had overheard conversations between Diana's mother and the hospital's financial counselor about the massive bills that were bankrupting Diana's family. But there was more. Robert's statement included details about that night that Diana had never known, details about how her mother had spent her final hours not just worried about her own condition, but heartbroken about the debt she was leaving her daughter with. According to Robert, Diana's mother had made a request to the hospital chaplain that had never been fulfilled. Diana felt her hands shaking as she read Robert's account. Her mother had asked the chaplain to contact someone, a wealthy businessman whose family had been helped by Diana's grandfather years earlier. She had hoped this person might remember the kindness and help Diana when she needed it most. The businessman's name was William Wellington, Marcus's grandfather. Diana stared at the document, reading it over and over, trying to process what it meant. Had Marcus's grandfather known about her mother? Had he known about Diana's situation? Had their meeting been orchestrated somehow? She called Robert Chen immediately, needing to understand exactly what he had witnessed that night 10 years ago. "Mrs. Wellington," Robert said when he answered the phone, his voice nervous but respectful. "I wasn't sure if I should include that information in my application. I didn't want to cause any problems. Tell me exactly what you remember about that night, Robert." "Every detail." Robert described finding Diana's mother crying in the hospital chapel, talking to the chaplain about her daughter and the impossible debt she was leaving behind. He remembered her mentioning that Diana's grandfather had once helped the Wellington family in some way, something about a shipping accident decades earlier where he had refused payment for rescue services his boat had provided. "Your mother said she had always been too proud to ask for help, but she was desperate," Robert explained. "She gave the chaplain Mr. Wellington's name and asked him to contact the family after she died, to see if they might help you. But the chaplain told her he couldn't make any promises." Diana felt the room spinning around her. "Did you ever see the chaplain contact anyone?" "I don't know if he did. I left that job not long after that night and then I made some bad choices that landed me in prison." After ending the call, Diana sat in her office for a long time, staring out the window at the city where her life had changed so dramatically. Had her meeting with Marcus been orchestrated by his grandfather? Had the old man known exactly who she was when he wrote the clause about marrying someone who had faced hardship? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. If it was true, it meant that their love story was even more impossible and wonderful than she had believed. But it also meant that Marcus might not know the truth about how they had really found each other. That evening, Diana waited until both children were asleep before approaching Marcus with what she had learned. He was in his study reviewing foundation reports when she knocked on the door. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Of course. What's wrong? You look upset." Diana sat down across from him and told him everything about Robert's application, about her mother's final request, about the possible connection between their families that went back decades. Marcus listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking questions for clarification but mostly just absorbing the enormity of what Diana was telling him. "So you think my grandfather orchestrated our meeting?" he asked when she finished. "I think it's possible. I think he might have known exactly who I was and where to find me." Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing this information. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. Part of me is amazed that your grandfather would go to such lengths to honor my grandfather's kindness. Part of me is wondering if anything about our relationship was real." "Diana." Marcus reached across the desk and took her hands. "Look at me." She met his eyes, seeing the love and certainty there. "I don't care if my grandfather arranged for us to meet. I don't care if he hired investigators to find you, or if he planned every detail of how we came together. None of that changes what happened after we met. None of that changes the choices we made or the love we built together. But what if he manipulated everything? What if our whole story is based on his planning rather than genuine feelings? Then he gave us the greatest gift anyone has ever given anyone else, the chance to find each other. Marcus stood up and walked around the desk to her. Diana, do you remember our first conversation in the diner? Of course. Do you remember how you challenged me, how you made me think about things I had never considered? Do you remember how strong and dignified you were, even in your worst circumstances? Diana nodded. That wasn't my grandfather's planning. That was you being exactly who you are. And everything I felt for you from that moment forward was real, no matter how we ended up in that diner together. Diana felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I've been so scared that if this was all planned, it would mean our love wasn't genuine. Our love is the most genuine thing in my life. It's the most genuine thing that's ever happened to me. Marcus pulled her into his arms. Diana, if my grandfather did arrange our meeting, all it means is that he was wise enough to recognize that we were meant for each other. You really believe that? I know that. And I'll tell you something else, even if he did plan our first meeting, he couldn't have planned everything that came after. He couldn't have planned how perfectly we work together, or how much we love our children, or how happy we've been for the past 10 years. Diana buried her face in Marcus's chest, breathing in his familiar scent and feeling the steady beat of his heart. He was right. Whatever role his grandfather might have played in bringing them together, their marriage, their family, their life together was entirely their own creation. Should we try to find out for sure? She asked. Look through your grandfather's papers, talk to his lawyers? Marcus considered this. Do you want to know for sure? I thought I did, but now I'm not certain. Does it matter? Not to me. Whether we met by chance or by design, whether my grandfather planned it or just got lucky with his requirements, none of that changes the fact that I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. They stood holding each other in Marcus's study, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together. Photos of their children, awards from the foundation, business documents that showed how they had transformed not just their own lives but the lives of thousands of other people. I love you too, Diana said quietly. And you're right, it doesn't matter how we found each other. What matters is what we've done since then. Should we tell the children about this someday? About the possibility that their great-grandfather might have arranged for us to meet? Diana smiled. We'll tell them that sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways to bring people together who are meant to be together. Whether that's through chance or planning or the love of someone who wanted to take care of his family even after he was gone. The next morning, Diana called Robert Chin back and told him that the foundation would be happy to help him with housing and job placement. She also invited him to join them for dinner the following week, wanting to thank him for sharing information that had helped her understand her family's history. Marcus had been right. It did not matter whether his grandfather had orchestrated their meeting. What mattered was that they had found each other, built a love that was strong and true, and created a life together that honored the best values from both of their families. The Wellington Foundation continued its work, helping families who faced the same kinds of crises that had once brought Diana and Marcus together. Hope and William grew up understanding that their family's unusual beginning was part of what made their love story special, not something to be embarrassed about. And Diana and Marcus continued to love each other with the deep, abiding affection that comes from having weathered challenges together, built something meaningful together, and chosen each other every day for more than a decade. On their 10th wedding anniversary, the anniversary of their second real wedding, they returned to the park where they had first decided to trust each other with their futures. Hope and William played on the swings while their parents sat on the bench by the pond, watching the ducks and talking about their dreams for the next 10 years. Any regrets? Marcus asked, echoing the question he had asked her so many times over the years. Only that it took us so long to realize we were in love, Diana replied. What about you? I regret that my grandfather never got to meet you and the children. He would have loved you all so much. I think he's still teaching us lessons even now. Marcus nodded, thinking about the latest revelation about their meeting and how it had only strengthened their bond rather than weakening it. The lesson that love is stronger than circumstances. That what matters is not how you find each other, but what you do once you're together. As they watched their children play and felt the warmth of the afternoon sun on their faces, both Diana and Marcus knew that their love story was far from over. They had many more years ahead of them, many more challenges to face together, many more people to help through their foundation. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, two people who had found in each other not just love, but purpose, partnership, and the kind of happiness that comes from building a life based on service to others. Their story had begun with a desperate billionaire and a homeless woman brought together by an old man's wisdom. It had become something much more beautiful, a love story about two people who had saved each other and then dedicated their lives to saving others. And as they sat in that park, surrounded by their children's laughter and secure in their love for each other, both Diana and Marcus knew that Marcus's grandfather had gotten exactly what he had hoped for when he wrote his unusual will. He had given his grandson the greatest gift possible, not just wealth but the wisdom to use it well, and the love of a woman who would help him become the man he was meant to be. Their love story was complete, but their life together was just beginning. And somewhere, in whatever place wise grandfathers go when their earthly work is done, William Wellington was smiling with satisfaction at a plan that had worked even better than he had dared to hope.